I'm not sure about this, but is trimming goat hooves the dreaded task of goat ownership? Sometimes I wonder. Trimming goat hooves may not be the most fun job, but it is very necessary for the health of your goats. And that is why we're going to talk about how to do it and how to do it properly. And the first thing is that goats really don't like their hooves being trimmed. They don't like to balance on 3 legs. And so there might be some kicking involved, or just where they're trying to jerk their foot away. And so that is one reason that as far as what you'll need to trim the hooves, you will need a few things to have ready before you start, and gloves are one of them. I have had it where I was trimming and the goat just pulled away and I nicked my hand with these clippers. So that is just something that will help. You'll know that you won't get cut and you won't have to worry about that. You'll also need some actual goat hoof trimmers. These are very nice to use. These orange handled ones are what I found to be the best to use. And it's not absolutely necessary, but something like this brush can help clean away the debris, and then it has like a hoof pick that'll help get all of the dirt that's trapped inside. It'll be able to come out with this. And then this is like a rasp that you can use to help with the bottom as you're finishing up the finishing touches. So this is another item that's not absolutely necessary, but that you can use as well. As far as how often you want to trim will really depend on your breed of goat, the genetics that they have, and just what you're feeding them. With my does, I need to be trimming their feet at least every 6 weeks, even as close to just a month apart. They grow very fast. And my wethers and my buck, they don't grow as fast, and so I'm not needing to trim them as often. So that's just something you're going to need to know for your particular animals, and based on what you're feeding them and just their environment, what they have available to them to be working on, that might be helping with their feet and keeping them kind of trimmed down naturally. Those are just going to be things that you're going to have to figure out what works best for you and your animals by just daily observing them and how fast they're growing. As far as where to trim, you're probably going to find that it is easiest to trim when they are secured in something like your milk stand. And the way I have it here, this milk stand actually has a wall on the side, and it doesn't make it as easy to trim them on that side that is closest to the wall. What you will find easiest is if you have a milk stand that is the freestanding that you can walk all the way around. So if you don't have one of those, or you don't have a milk stand like this, and you do have a helper, you can ask them to help you. Ask them very nicely, but if they're willing to help, you can actually tip your goat over on its side. They can hold the goat down, and then you can sit next to the goat and trim that way. You can also, just using a collar, with their collar and like a chain, or like a leash, you can hook them to a fence or something secure that way as well, and just work on them with them standing on the ground and you kneeling beside them. So that's another option as far as how and where to trim. As you're trimming, you're going to be wanting to watch for hoof rot and hoof scald. And if you do see that, you need to treat for that. So do your research as far as what to do when you find that. You're going to want to trim off any of those bad parts and then treat for that. And if you do cut the hoof and there is blood, you'll do want to apply a blood stop. And then depending on how bad it is, you'll want to put on something so it's not in contact with the ground. So you can wrap it up or put something that, like those bandage, the liquid bandages, you can put those on there, and when you do, you can just hold it for 60 to 90 seconds so it's allowed to dry, and usually that lasts for about 24 hours if it's under normal dry conditions and it's not raining. When you're trimming your goat's hooves, you want to know also just the parts of the hoof. That's important because you need to know what you're dealing with to be able to know how to trim them properly. So in this diagram here, I'm going to point out the different parts of the hoof. So here's the bottom of the hoof. This top part here is the toe. Here is the hoof wall. This outer portion on each side is the hoof wall. And here in this part here is the sole or the soft frog. And this area at the bottom is the heel. Then here, down here is the ball. Then there's the dew claws. And the dew claws also need to be trimmed if they get too long, so that's something to be aware of. But again, trim little bits at a time. Don't go just fast and furious, but they can be trimmed when they get too long. You may notice that your hooves of your goats look like this after they haven't been trimmed. You can see that the tips of their toes have grown out. They're starting to kind of splay, and the bottom is rough and jagged. The hoof wall that we talked about, the hoof wall actually, when they start growing and growing, will actually grow under the hoof, and that can be dangerous because it can trap the poop, the bacteria, all the debris and dirt can get trapped under the hoof when it is allowed to grow too long, and that can cause hoof rot and things that are very serious for your goat's health. So you want to be trimming that off regularly and watching the health of the goat's hooves so that you can quickly react and treat them when needed. In the end result of your trimming, you want it to look like this. So you can see that it is parallel to the coronary band of the hoof and trimmed so that it is straight and parallel to the way the hoof is actually put together. So every once in a while you're going to want to put the hoof down, take a step back and look and see if it needs to be corrected. If you notice that the hoof is growing in a certain way that is just naturally growing really long on the toe, you don't want to follow the curve or the way it's growing that way. You actually want to trim it up so that the toe isn't too long and that it's actually parallel to that coronary band of the hoof and foot of that goat. So just always step back and look at what's happening so that you can correct what you're doing as you're going. And the end result is that you want it to look like this. I have my gloves on, my tools are all right here within reach, and I am ready to go. So we're going to start with the front hoof here. I have found sometimes that this works because goats really do not like to stand on 3 legs. They will resist it immensely. And on the front leg, if you're picking up the front leg, they really like to lean, and then they're jerking. And sometimes it works if I use the perfect size something like this bucket to put their knee on as I'm working. And so that might be a trick, and that might work and it might not. But once they realize that they can lean on that, it sometimes helps. I'm going to start by using the pick. I'm going to pick out all the debris that's in the middle here, and then that exposes the hoof wall that is really tall up in here. And then we'll begin trimming. So I'm going to begin trimming by the outside part here. So we've cleaned out the debris, and sometimes if you don't have one of these hoof picks, don't feel like, oh no, that's awful, I don't have one. You can use the tip of this that's sharp. You can clean out the debris with that as well. So that will work as well. Once you've cleaned out the debris in between, you'll begin by clipping and cutting the outside wall of the hoof, getting that extra long part there. And you can see this side was just beginning to fold under. I'm going to clip that out so nothing can get trapped. Now we're going to trim the inside. There's always this longer part on the inside on each side. Trimming the toe so it's not too long. Remember, we're going to stop when we see pink. It's very important to be aware of. I've always found that it's very deceiving when I'm holding the hoof like this, that I end up kind of putting them together like this when it's in my hand. I'm not putting them the way they actually stand. And when I set them down, the inside hoof, because she actually stands like this, is actually longer. And so if you can kind of make it so the heel back here, the bulb part is actually flat with your thumb, you can see that this inner hoof is actually longer than the outside one. So that's one thing to also be aware of, because you want them to both be the same length. And then where you move to the heel, this portion, this soft portion here, you cut off that. So you want the hoof to be flat. There's a little bit inside. We'll cut off between the toes. He's getting done with their grain. It's gonna get restless. Oh no. Okay. So now I'm going to, I've gotten all the excess portion off. It is very hard to trim the sole of the hoof with these. So that is where this does come in handy, because it can be used to rasp off and flatten out and get off the jagged parts of the hoof. So that's when that comes in handy, to get it flat. Remember, cutting very small pieces off at a time is important. You don't want to be getting into the blood or cutting into the blood, because there is tetanus in the soil. They actually don't have to cut it on a nail, that's the common belief, but they actually can get tetanus from the soil. So when they get a cut on the hoof, which is directly touching the soil, then that's can be very dangerous. So just be aware of that. I'm going to set our hoof down now, and now I'm going to look at it from the side. Remember, we want it to be parallel cut, parallel to the coronary band right here, and it looks like it is. That inside toe is a bit long still. I worked on a bit more of that, the toe on the inside, and got it a little bit shorter because it was longer than the other one. Now we're moving to the back leg. This is the one that can be a little bit more dangerous, just because they like to kick with it, and it's easier for them to kick. So be aware of that, and just be aware to hold on to their leg as tightly as you can without hurting them, of course, and then hold on to your nippers, because that's where when they jerk is when they can hurt you. You don't want to end up stabbing them or anything, so just be aware of that. And I found that having them lean on my leg like this does help, but they'll probably still kick. So you clean out, it's basically the same as the front. We're going to clean out any debris under here, and then we'll start with the outside wall. Clip off that extra there on each side. You can kind of see the way the grain of the hoof is working. So I'm following that, because I don't want to trim. I don't want to trim the way the hoof has been growing. I want to trim the way it is in proportion to that coronary band. Now we'll move to the inside between the toes. Get that trimmed off. On each side. You really do want to have sharp nippers when you're doing this, because you'll be very frustrated if they won't cut. Your goat will too, because it'll take longer and you won't be getting it very good. Cutting off a portion here, then we'll move Again, you'll want to watch. As you can see, I'm flattening it so that they're even. This inside part is longer. If I were to set it down, it would be longer than the other one. So I'm going to clip off a bit more of the toe. Okay, stop, Eva. Okay, now we will trim the heel so it is flat. That was the snort of dissension. Okay. Okay, now we're gonna flatten it off with this, with the rasp. So as you can see, it is flat. The heel has been trimmed, the toes are trimmed. It's as even. I'm going to set it down. I'm going to make sure that I've cut so it's even to the ground. And it is. The dew claw is another area that you can trim. It's made up of the same material as the heel, so it's a very soft, fleshy material. You don't want to cut too deep, so just bits at a time. Just like that. You have the dew claws trimmed, and there you go. Don't frustrate yourself. If you get frustrated, and finish one foot and come back to it another day. And no one says you have to finish all 4 feet in one setting. If you're correctively working on hooves because you've missed a few trimmings, you can trim a bit at a time. Take a day and get the worst part off, and trim off that worst part that's overgrown and rolling under the big parts, and then come back the next day and see if there's anything else that you missed or that need to be worked on again. So just remember, give yourself grace. You don't have to get it perfect the first day. Keep working at it, keep practicing. Give your goat grace, because she doesn't like it very much. And just know that this is an important part of raising goats. It may not be the most fun, but you'll get better with it as you go, and the more you practice. And good thing is you have a lot of opportunity to practice because they're always growing. Give yourself a pat on the back and your goat for trimming hooves. Good job, you can do it.